So your book, Hip Hop Revolution, The Culture and Politics of Rap, covered many, many, many different topics. I am curious from your perspective, and also as sort of an explainer, um, in your eyes, what is the relationship? This is a little complex, but like, what is the relationship between hip hop, capitalism, and in your eyes, the prison industrial complex?
Hmm. So hip hop clearly as a culture that has insinuated itself in pop culture is inextricably tied to capitalism in so many ways. And you can't get around the commodification of at least, two of the main elements of hip hop, the MC and the DJ or producer without, getting around capitalism. So that's a critical part of it. Hip hop itself has, because it comes out of a community that has been particularly devastated by the process of mass incarceration over the last 50 years. You have so many people laid into the prison industrial complex with commentary of all sorts. And it's hard to even imagine, I think, um, for non-Americans to really think about just how devastating the reach of the carceral state has been to young black males in particular over the last 50 years, to the point that the message, which came out in the early 1980s, you're talking about 81, 82, that you have them in New York City long before Michelle Alexander talked about the new Jim Crow, and long before my book came out in 2007, long before Ivory Tower academics were talking about the carceral state and mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex. Before these terms were circulating, hip hop was providing commentary on it. And you see the police being intrusive. I know behind you you have Black Star's album, and on that in that video definition, you have them going through Brooklyn, Most Def and Talib, with cameos with Common and others, and the police intervene and they stop their flow, right? And they literally stop the flow, and you see them kind of justifying their existence and showing their papers to the police. And so, whether you're talking about Biggie, or whether you're talking about Cube, or whether you're talking about Jay-Z, whether you could go all the way up to Clips, I mean, you have police have been a visual text in music videos, and a literary text for their songs for going 45 years almost now.
Right.
And so yeah, it's hard to get around just how inextricably connected mass incarceration has been to the community that gave rise to hip hop.
Right. And some of the pioneers in the space, and let me just say, I was fortunate enough to go see Public Enemy at, out of all places, Riot Fest in Chicago, which was tremendous because that was like a bucket list thing for me. It Takes a Nation of Millions would have them in a cell. Chuck D raps about how he feels locked in a cell. So it feels like there is a direct connection with, and I'm jumping all over the place here, but the thoughts are just infused in me. For example, when Cameron went on Fox News, Bill O'Reilly's show, and he was talking about the things that he sees and the injustices that he sees, it seems like it is. You mentioned Reagan, and Kendrick Lamar even has a song, Ronald Reagan era, but it just feels like this is a reflection of a system that put predominantly Black Americans in this space to make them lesser than, as you stated, all the way from Jim Crow to now. Considering all of that, is in your eyes hip hop currently, as it has been sort of moved in a different direction in the year of our Lord 2025, do you feel as though hip hop is doing its due diligence, overall, not even in the mainstream, but overall, to meet the moment of fascism as we see it right now?
The short answer is no, but I have a more as I've gotten older, I've kind of have grown to expect less, and
Hmm.
part of it is that to be fair, I think that the public has been somewhat primed to expect hip hop to weigh in on a lot of topical issues, in a way that we don't expect any other genre of music to do. Like we don't really expect gospel music or Chris Brown and R&B, or I think for jazz artists, or for country music, or you name it. I don't think that people really expect house music musicians to talk about these issues, and I think that there's a particular burden that people put on them, and it's because we've been spoiled in many ways. I think we have had hip hop artists who have had a sort of irreverence for the weighing in and controversial issues. They have had a sort of courage and temerity when it comes to it in ways that other people don't. They're unapologetic. And I love what Jay-Z said many years ago, is that we didn't go to the mainstream, but the mainstream came to us. But you see that in Run DMC's video, Kings of Rock, and when they come out with, the King of Rock that is not higher. And you see this video where they go to the Rock and Roll Museum, and there's a gatekeeper who is telling them they don't belong here. And Run DMC, they don't put their heads down and say, "Oh, we don't belong here. Let's go somewhere else." They move the guy to the side and walk right in, and then take control of the spot. And eventually, that gatekeeper is rocking the gear. He's nodding his head. He's rocking out to Run DMC, right? And so, hip hop has always been about being quite, I think, bold, courageous, and defiant. And in those sort of areas of defiance and courage, they've entered into political commentary, and they've talked about police brutality. And I ask my students oftentimes, name me some artists from the 1980s, and they'll come up with Luther Vandross and Patti LaBelle and Michael Jackson and New Edition and Boys and Men, a whole bunch of people. And I'll say, what were the conditions like in Black communities in the 1980s, right? And we'll talk about all these things. And I'll say, who was talking about that stuff? And no one was talking about it. Hip hop was talking about it, right? Hip hop talked about poverty. They talked about mass incarceration. They talked about the drug trade. They talked about Reaganomics. They were talking about these things. And I think a lot of times we got spoiled because we anticipated them to continue to weigh in on that stuff. But they really shifted, like most musicians, became sort of mute in the face of things that we were really demanding and expecting them to be much more articulate, much more defiant, much more courageous in the way that generations prior were. And when we look at Public Enemy, standing on the American flag behind bars, that's on their album, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. And you have a B-boy in the crosshairs of an assassin's rifle. That's very powerful, right? I mean, so you can deconstruct that so many ways. And it's fascinating just how much hip hop was in your face with their defiance to oppression of different sorts. And, you see it here and there, but it's not the bread and butter. It's not something that we see from mainstream artists. And I think that, like I said, I've grown not to expect it. And I've grown to expect them to be more like the Chris Browns of the world and the Billie Eilishes of the world. And I don't know. I don't want to take anything away from Billie Eilish. I don't really listen to her. She might really be weighing into a lot of political stuff. So I hope I don't get attacked, because Billie Eilish might be wildly political and subversive in ways I don't know. But I know Chris Brown isn't, so
Right.
I can use his name for sure.